Yeats was a musician who had a really multifaceted career as a performer, an educator, teacher, lecturer, and really an advocate for and an authority on the harp.
Gráinne Yeats was a very special person. She was an innovator, she was a harper, singer, scholar, historian, and broke so many boundaries that it's almost impossible to detail them.
Gráinne Yeats operated at a time where harping and the making and playing of that music was at a really low point. And without her, you would question, would we have the hugely vibrant scene we have at the moment for both the wirestone harp and other contemporary practices in traditional Irish harping.
So she was an arranger and teacher, and really one of the founding people of the modern harp revival.
Gráinne Yeats was the daughter of S.P. O'Hegarty and Rebecca Smith. And S.P. O'Hegarty was a member of the Irish Republican Brotherhood and Rebecca was a member of Cumann na Mán. Gráinne had a bilingual upbringing and the family spent many holidays in the Gaeltacht.
Well, cuasaí teann agus Gráinne is doch an rud is mó a rithean domsa ná a bhéan ní láram a riamh ní chéile ní méarla ní hé go raibh rud ní cinenne a bhéal agus gáilní a duine mar sin agus bhreasta go bin an teanga a bhí adra. Bin chuir aithne éise trí bhile agus bin so níor bhéan cheistríomh na hebh. So bhí sport adra an gáilní agus a gáilní an bhile
agus híl mé in dhé sin go mar sleachta a slíomhtú. Agus híl mé in dhé sin go mar lóchran ó dhéthú. Nó go mar tú an réalt ólais a dul róm is mar dhéthú.
She studied piano and singing in the Royal Irish Academy of Music. She was a classically trained singer. She performed Bach and Handel, sang with the Darland Consort. She became very interested in the harp when she heard Joan O'Hara, the actress, play the harp in the Abbey. And Joan O'Hara, as we know, is the sister of Mary O'Hara, the very well-known harp player and singer. The story that Gráinne herself would have told was that when her first child was born, Catriona, who later became a renowned pedal harpist, concert harpist, that she was out walking her buggy in Churchtown, where they lived at the time, with a very good friend of hers, Elizabeth Hannon. Gráinne said she had heard this woman, Joan O'Hara, playing the harp, and she thought, I'd like to learn that. And Elizabeth said immediately, well, I'll learn it too. And that's how Gráinne's love affair with the harp began.
Irish harping goes way, way back for over 1,000 years. If we go back to the 12th century with people like Geraldus Cambrensis, who had nothing good to say about Ireland and certainly not about its people, but he's something good to say about Irish harping and the quality of its playing. By the late 18th century, you have what was in danger of becoming the very last of the bardic harper tradition. So in 1792, you have the Belfast Harp Gathering. They employed a young Edward Bunting, who was an organist at the time, to notate these melodies. Edward Bunting published his first collection in 1796 or 1797. Some people argue the toss over the exact publication date. But they weren't accessed that often, and Gráinne Yeats comes into this picture then. Danger taken for granted the effort and inspiration and passion it takes to revive a tradition, and it can be traced through Gráinne Yeats right back to Bunting, right back beyond our written history.
So Gráinne played the modern Irish harp, of course, and the early Irish harp. The difference between the two would be that the modern Irish harp was the brainchild of John Egan, the very famous and extremely gifted pedal harp builder who was here in Dublin on Dawson Street at the turn of the 19th century. and he came up with, of course, a smaller version of his pedal harp with the same tuning, the same construction type. The modern Irish harp was strung with the gut strings of the pedal harp. The early Irish harp is, organologically speaking, a completely different instrument. So it's a medieval construction type, very simple construction type. If you imagine the tripartite triangular frame of a harp, you have the pillar, you have the neck, and the resonating chamber is in fact one single log of wood, strung with metal strings. For a lot of its history played with long nails, and then in the 18th century no longer, that was dying out. So the aesthetic, the music, the approach, everything is quite different to the modern harp.
Really, she was one of the first people to look into the wire-strung harp and really explore both the properties of the instrument in terms of creating replicas, looking into string gauges and dimensions of the instrument.
She would have travelled with Micheál, who, as we know, is the son of W.B. Yeats, and Micheál lectured on the university circuit, and then Gráinne would have played the harp, sang, talked about the music of the harpers. And indeed, it was in the States there that she met J. Witcher, the harp maker, who made her first wire-strung harp. And she had gone to all kinds of ends to get somebody here to make her a wire-strung harp. She tried a furniture maker and that fell through. She tried an aeronautical engineer and that fell through.
As such, I would characterise her as the first practice research harpist in Ireland. Practice research is a fairly new academic term, and it includes I suppose, rebuilding old instruments, building copies of them so that we can see what they teach us. And also the other side of that coin is looking at the earliest sources or the most reliable sources to see what they teach us and to put those two things together.
One of the first people really to bring it to the forefront of performance as well. And she really performed across Ireland and internationally. So she really created an international platform for the instrument.
I get the impression that she was basically sort of laughed at, and people said to her, like, what's the point of that old thing? Like, why would you be doing that? But like all curmudgeonly pioneers, she stuck to her guns and thought, no, this is what I want to do.
She could be abrasive sometimes if she wasn't, if someone hadn't, again, if the homework wasn't done, or if you weren't paying the proper respect to whatever was around, she wouldn't mince her words, So we were in Amsterdam at the European Harp Symposium. Myself and Anne-Marie O'Farrell were playing, and Gráinne was giving the lecture. And we were playing, one of the pieces we were going to play was Lady Dillon. It was in two parts. It was a sort of a 4/4 and then a sort of a jig at the end. And Gráinne came to us before the lecture. She goes, "Now, don't start that too fast, because the jig is really a tricky one, and if you get there too fast, it's on your own head."
A lot of people will say to you that she was acerbic, she was sharp, she was critical, but it was always in the most constructive way. And she always would come back, and if she felt she was in the wrong, she would rectify it and say, I was wrong there. But she really believed passionately in what she was doing. And I suppose, when you have people like that, it's my way or no way. And that's the only way that you actually succeed.
She was really meticulous in everything she did. She had very, very high standards, and that comes across throughout her work. From international performances to lessons for beginners, you can see that there's the same attention to detail and professionalism throughout.
Happy with that?
If there's time, can I do one more? Yes. There was one part that wasn't quite Gráinne. The chords were a little substituted.
So my name is Maeve Gabrurs, and I'm the archivist here at the Irish Traditional Music Archive. So it's a multimedia collection,
And it's one of the larger collections that we have here in ITMA. So we would call it, in describing it, a fond. So that means that we have the entirety of the collection here in ITMA. There are those sound recordings, reel-to-reel, cassettes, vinyl LPs. There's quite a lot of published books in her collection. I think herself and her husband Michael were real bibliophiles. And I do get the sense that they scoured the second-hand bookshops for, you know, really interesting books on Irish music, anything really to do with the harp and to do with Irish music. So there's some really interesting original manuscripts in the collection. So this is, it's dated 1816. We don't really know anything about it. We have had a researcher look at this, and she was saying that there's some very interesting arrangements of some Irish tunes in it, but there's a mixture of Scottish, English and Irish material. There's one there, the Irish Cry. There's also a wonderful collection of programmes very specific to the 50s, 60s and 70s. All the venues you could think of, the Gaiety, the Royal Irish Academy, the Peacock Theatre. She seemed to be very active in going to anything that was on in Dublin, and of course very much music orientated as well. But it's a fantastic snapshot of events that would have been happening in Dublin at that time. This is a real mix. There's the O'Carrollin Harp Festival, Dublin International Festival of Music and Arts. Yeah, and then she was very involved in the celebrations in 1992 to commemorate the Belfast Harp Festival. Of course, what's of real interest to ITMA, the unique material that is within her collection. So it ranges from correspondence to lecture notes.
She was an ardent photographer, and she would have taken photographs of harps wherever she went in the world. There was a wonderful collection of slides where she travelled to Ireland looking at the high crosses and looking at the sites for where harps were replicated. These were all organised in a really scholarly academic way, with little white cards associated with her, what she wanted to say about each harp.
There's recordings, really detailed notes on her own performances, and she was very much a reflective practitioner. She kept notes on repertoire, on audience numbers, audience reaction.
She went to India, Japan, Russia, travelled all over Europe, and we have some great notebooks from her time abroad. Each day she would write detailed diary entries about who she met and what she did and where she went. So you can see in her correspondence and in her travels and in her photographs trips to harp workshops. So there's a great selection of photographs of her time in Japan in 1972, I think it was. She went to Aoyama. He was a harp maker. There's some wonderful Fuji-color photographs of her trip to that workshop, of sort of half-finished harps hanging on the ceiling upside down, and the wood that's going to be used to make harps, you know, in the future. And then you can see her sitting in a Japanese guest house afterwards with no shoes on her feet, playing the harp that obviously she had collected from the harp maker that day. So, yeah. Holidays in the Soviet Union. So she did tour in the Soviet Union in Russia. So you never know what you're going to find in here. So there's our harp key. She's speaking here about the wildlife. There is a small animal native to this island called quagga. This is a small marsupial and looks like a large rat. The Dutch, who were the first travellers here, called the island rodent's nest, meaning rat's nest. There's something. Built a prison for Aboriginals, a reformatory for bad boys, and prisoner camps for World War I and II. And the prison camps are gone, and the reformatory has been converted to a hotel. Lovely.
This collection offers enormous potential essential, because you have the work of a musician and their research as a real source for future interpretation and reimagining of work, because Gráinne's material, it was so foundational and so important for all of the harp players that came after her, that it's a very exciting prospect to revisit some of that music and some of those arrangements and do something really new and exploratory with the materials.
It's really a gift from the Yeats family to the state. It's a gift to researchers who want to know more about what Gráinne was doing and Gráinne's interests and insights into harping. It's an opportunity for contemporary artists to come and seek inspiration in her work and her life. It's an opportunity to reflect on the role of women in collecting and working for traditional Irish music in the 20th century.
The Yeats family embodies a tradition of Protestant culture. A notable family of painters produced two geniuses, both of whom combined their own observance with the conscious of the realities of modern Irish life. Talking about the men, of course, now. Stop talking about Gráinne. Daughter of the idiosyncratic Secretary of Posts and Telegraphs, P.S. O'Hegarty, she was steeped in the other cultural heritage. Her father wrote a great deal in Irish for various journals, sent his children to the Gaeltacht for their holidays, rode around the city on a bike, and showed vigorous independence of mind. All about him.
It's really well known that despite some amazing work that has been done over the last 50, 60 years, there is still an underrepresentation of the role that women have played. It's not that those women weren't present, it's that the work hasn't really been done and their presence hasn't been highlighted in the way that it needs to be. By digitising and making the collection accessible, it really opens the door to other academics and musicians to engage with the work of a very important woman collector.
So it is a difficult instrument, but oh, the sound of it is so gorgeous. It can send you into another world. The aspect of singing is being neglected. The people are largely giving up singing to the harp. They're all playing it all the time as an instrument, which is a pity. I hope that the singing will come back.
Nach ik leef al nooit zo'n